had always been the last in the class. I didn't show much interest in the subjects taught by the teacher, and she constantly scolded me for my lack of attention. My classmates constantly laughed at me, but I didn't care, as the classes were quite long and I was more interested in sleeping. One day I fell asleep for so long that I woke up when everyone had gone home, even the teacher. I went out to see if I could find anyone in the hallways, but no one was there. I went to the exit door and it was locked. I was scared because it was getting dark and I wondered where my parents were. After thinking about how to get out of there for a long time, I gave up and headed for the principal's office. I had been inside many times before, but never had the freedom I had now. While I was there, I started going through documents and found an article about missing children in this school. I was surprised because there were so many cases and the disappearances had started since the school began operating. I took a seat in front of the desk and found some documents. These contained the photos of the children, and it was not very clear how they had disappeared. They all had one thing in common, and that was that they were last seen inside the school. I felt a knot in my chest. I was desperate to get out of there, fearing that the same thing would happen to me. I saw a brightness through the window in the office doorway. The light was getting closer and I could hear loud footsteps in the hallway. I thought it was the principal or the teacher who had come back to get me. So I looked for a place to hide so I wouldn't be seen in the office. I didn't want to get into any more trouble than I was already in. Behind the desk there was a locker. Since I was small, I fit perfectly. Suddenly the door opened and someone came in. It was a janitor, but I had never seen him before at school. He had a rather imposing physique, a lot of beard, and his uniform was dirty. He carried a lamp in one hand and an axe in the other. He began to search inside the office, as if he knew someone was there, but he couldn't find me and left. When I saw no trace of that man, I ran to the door to try to open it and get out of there, but he noticed and came back. I couldn't see him, but I could see the light of his lamp when he peeked out, and I felt that he was closer and closer, but the door wouldn't open. It was locked from the outside. I heard his footsteps, and they were getting faster and faster. I looked for something to knock on the door. There was no way out. I was finished, I thought. Suddenly they opened the door. The first thing I saw were the lights of police cars, and then my parents running towards me to hug me. All the townspeople were there, as they had spent most of the night looking for me. Even the teacher and the principal were very worried. They asked me about what had happened, and I told them about that man, the janitor I had seen inside the school. I described his physical appearance, but they mentioned that they had never seen anyone like that working in the school. They decided to go in with the police and search the entire school, but after almost an hour of searching, they found no one. My parents were upset. They complained to the teacher for forgetting about me and to the police for not finding the man who was likely to continue chasing more children. Once everything was over, we went home, and being calm, I went to my computer and looked for the list of all the school employees. A man named Bill Davis appeared. He was the janitor I saw when I was in the principal's office and the one who chased me when I was trying to leave. He passed away at the school 20 years ago. When summer vacation started, my friends and I planned to go camping in the woods. It was a full moon and the night would be perfect for telling ghost stories. We took the old road because it was the shortest way to our destination, and we also wanted to make the trip more exciting because there was a legend of spiritual beings roaming the place and no one wanted to drive there. We were listening to music all the time, and suddenly we saw a girl who stopped us. We turned down the music and asked her where she was going. She pointed her finger in the direction we were going. We asked her to get in the car, and she did. Her skin was pale and her hair was red. She was wearing a white coat and her shoes were a little dirty. We thought she had been missing for a while. I asked her why she was there at that hour, but she didn't answer or make any gestures. We continued walking, but the atmosphere was heavy. We felt some fear and shivers. I thought about asking the girl to get out of the car, but I felt remorse until I looked in the rear view mirror. I could see the reflection of all my companions, except for hers. I was stunned at that moment, and I think my companions realized it too because they were also stunned. Suddenly she made a stop. She just said, "Here." Those were the only words that came out of her mouth. He got out of the car and went into the woods. We stood and watched him until his motorcycle disappeared in the darkness. From that day on, we never went camping again. The other day, I heard on the news about a series of disappearances on the old highway, and they described a red-haired girl with white tez as being responsible. At that moment, I felt relieved and happy to be home. I can't remember the last time I took a vacation from my job. Every day I showed up to work early and left when there was no one else left in the office. Even though every day I felt more tired, I had goals and I didn't want to be left behind. I had been at it for over a year and my performance had never suffered. But one day I fell asleep at my workstation. It happened so fast, I didn't even realize it happened. I started dreaming, but it was very real. I was in the middle of the office and there was no one there but me. When I say me, I mean my body lying in the station. My soul left my body and I started walking around the office. Everything was dark. There was fog everywhere. I remember taking the elevator. It looked a little different than I remembered it. It had no buttons to push and was much smaller. I descended to a place that was definitely not the company. There were hallways with many rooms, but they were closed. I walked slowly, and after a few meters, I finally saw someone in the distance. He didn't move from where he was, so I approached. It was my neighbor Joe, waiting for me with a smile. Joe had passed away when I was only 12 years old. He pointed out how much I had grown, gave me a hug, and told me that although he was lonely and needed company, it was not the time for me to be in that place. He kindly told me to leave as soon as I could because he was coming. I didn't know who he was referring to, Joe, so I left scared. As I walked away, I heard him yelling at me, "Run! Don't stop!" I took the elevator to another floor. It was a much spookier place than the last one. It had a blue light at the bottom, and here there were many entities asking for help. They were crawling on the floor and trying to grab my feet. I ran out of there, but I collided head-on with someone. It was a horrifying being, and in his eyes you could see a lot of evil. I think this is what Joe was referring to. I went into a room quickly and closed the door. I closed my eyes, counted down, and then woke up in the office. But there was no one there. It looked like I was in the same dream. I walked out of the building and there was no one on the street. Everyone was gone. I went home and saw a picture of me in the hallway that said, "We will always remember you." There were a few things missing from the house, so I decided to go to the store. I did what I normally do before I go shopping. I made a list. On my way there, I saw someone looking at me while I was driving. He was standing in front of my house. He wasn't smiling, he wasn't making any gestures. He was just standing there. I got a little worried, as this person might not have good intentions and just come into my house. Who knows? I decided to continue, and after a while I had already forgotten about that guy. I was in the store comparing some items. I still couldn't decide which one I was going to take home. Outside the store I saw the same guy again. He was standing next to my car and staring at me. He had something tattooed on his forehead. You couldn't really see what it was, but his expression was one of a friend. I was distracted for a second, and when I looked back, the man was gone. I just went through the cashier and paid for the products I had taken and finally went home. While I was inside the house, I heard noises coming from outside and I opened the window to see. But there was no one there, so I continued watching TV. Someone knocked on the door and I found it strange as it was very late. I went to check and there was no one there, although there was a note on the floor. I opened it and it said, "I am closer than you think." I was perplexed. I went into the house and closed the door quickly. I continued watching TV, and on the news they were talking about a guy that the police were looking for and that he was very dangerous, but I didn't think it was the same guy who was in front of my house, even though I was very scared. An hour later I was falling asleep and suddenly there was a loud knock on the door. I quickly got up from the couch and looked through the peephole in the door. There was the man standing in front of the door. I quickly stepped back and called the police. A woman answered and I explained the situation and described the subject. She quickly interrupted me and said that the police were looking for him. His name was Jeff, she said, and he was very dangerous. Lock all the doors to your house and stay inside. I sighed for a moment and realized the situation I was in. It was the same guy from the news. The police arrived and searched the house and the surrounding area, but did not find the man. Shortly after, I was informed that he was apprehended a few blocks away when he tried to break into a house. They said good night and left. I saw again on the local news the picture of the guy the police caught and was surprised. It was not the guy who was knocking on my door. He was still out there, maybe waiting for the perfect time to come back.